Candace, you're live. You can go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am so pleased to be invited to come talk about this important topic, and I'm so glad you've joined us for that. My name is Candace. I am the Advanced Care Planning Program Manager at VCU Health System. So we'll start by talking about that. What the heck is advanced care planning? And if you're like the people that I talk to about this, you're thinking, I have no idea what this is about, or maybe it has something to do with an advance directive or somebody to make decisions for me. So we'll move right into what it is. So it is a process of planning for future medical decisions. And to be effective, the process includes an understanding possible future situations and decisions, and that understanding is on a spectrum. So it starts with understanding that any one of us could be hit by a car today, not be able to make healthcare decisions for ourselves, and someone is going to need to make those decisions for us. So that's understanding on one end of the spectrum. All the way toward the other end of the spectrum is about specific treatments or procedures, like CPR, for example. What is CPR, and why would I want CPR? And there are circumstances under which I wouldn't want CPR. So understanding is a really important part of this process. And then reflecting on our personal goals and values and beliefs, including cultural, community beliefs, religious or spiritual beliefs, personal beliefs that that influence our decisions about healthcare. And then discussing these. It's great if we have this understanding and if we've reflected and thought about this, but if we don't discuss this with the people who have to carry out a plan, then it's not doing us a whole lot of good. So advanced care planning is about this process that hopefully yields a high quality advanced care planning document like an advanced directive. And this is something that we don't do just one time and check it off our checklist and say, okay, I don't need to worry about that anymore. It actually is something we need to revisit over time because our circumstances change. Sometimes our goals and values and preferences change. So it really should start with all adults. Everyone 18 and older should recognize that we can have that unexpected accident or illness that leaves us unable to speak for ourselves, and think about who's the best person to make decisions for me if that happens. And then for most of us, we'll develop chronic and progressive diseases. And as we begin to have those during our lifetimes, we experience those chronic and progressive diseases, and perhaps we start having complications from those, then we might want to revisit this again and say, how has this experience changed the way I feel about future decisions? So, for example, if you're somebody who has something called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, maybe you had some experiences with being in respiratory distress or even had to be on a ventilator, and that's going to help you make decisions about that experience. Would being on a ventilator, is that something you're willing to do again? Is it something you're willing to do short term, long term? These are the kinds of things that happen that mean we need to revisit our advanced care plan. And this continues all the way through the time where we start approaching end of life and might want to start considering hospice care, palliative care and hospice care. Two different things. Palliative care is the specialty that focuses on pain and symptom relief, and hospice care is care that focuses on taking excellent care of people at the very end of life, in the last 6 months or so of life. And so you can see how the circumstances change and we want to revisit our planning over time. When we do high quality advanced care planning, it has excellent outcomes, and those are better patient and family coping and ease burden of decision making. When we these conversations may be hard to have, but almost everyone I talk to feels a tremendous sense of relief when it's over. They know they need to talk about these things, and it really does give them a huge sense of relief to know that they thought it through and made some good decisions and not burdened themselves or their families. it produces more beneficial care and reduced suffering because the care that a person is receiving is centered on that person's goals and values and not assumptions about what people in general might want or not want. Fewer hospitalizations. Lots of people have no interest in spending a lot of time at the hospital when as they're approaching the end of life, or they would much rather be with their families. And so by having these conversations, we can figure out what our goals are. If that's our goal, how we can get there. And then time to make informed decisions, build personal goals. It's really, really important that we do this well before the crisis, because once a crisis happens, we may not have time or the ability to have this kind of high quality conversation. So as I said, everyone 18 and older got to be an adult to create one of these documents. But we should all plan ahead for that unexpected injury or illness, that car accident, that stroke, that catastrophic thing that happens that we don't anticipate, that leaves us unable to make healthcare decisions for ourselves. And it really needs to be done in advance of the emergency, because once you lose the ability to make decisions, you lose the ability to decide about who your decision maker should be. So we always start with just, let's talk about who the best person is to make decisions for me if I can't make them for myself. And in Virginia, if you do not appoint someone to make healthcare decisions for you, that person is called an agent, a healthcare agent. If you do not appoint an agent, the law in Virginia decides who your decision maker is. And that person would be a court-appointed guardian. If one has been appointed for you, it has to be appointed for you. If there is no guardian, then it is by law your spouse, even if you're separated, even if you've been estranged for many, many years, if you are still legally married, that person is your decision maker unless a divorce action has been filed. If there is no spouse, it goes down to adult children, and not the oldest child, not the most reasonable child. It is all the children. And maybe in families where there are lots of children, sometimes this can be difficult because people do not come to understandings about a situation and decisions about how best to handle it in the same time frame. So having a group of people make a decision is unfortunately a great way to set up for conflict, and that's the last thing we need when we're dealing with a difficult situation. So that's the danger of having a group of people make decisions for you. Not that any of those people individually couldn't do a good job, but every team needs a quarterback to call the plays and to say, okay, I think we've come to a decision now. So again, it is in Virginia, if you do not appoint a decision maker, it is your spouse, unless a divorce action has been filed. All the adult children. If there are no adult children, it goes up to parents if the parents are still living. Parents and out to siblings, same situation as the children. If there are multiple siblings, they all have to come to a consensus, or else the majority rules. And then if we don't have siblings, then any blood relative in descending order of relationships, and you get into aunts and uncles and cousins and that kind of thing. And the blood relative part is important. So stepchildren we can consider them to be our children, but they are not our children under the eyes of the law. So it's important that we understand that this is how the law is written, and it will help some of us understand why it's important that we appoint a decision maker. And just to clarify, a decision maker healthcare decision maker does not make decisions for you or consent to things for you if you are able to make them for yourself. So as long as you can make decisions for yourself, you're the one making those decisions. This is only if you lose that ability. They do not make decisions for you after you die. That is in a document a last will and testament determines how somebody after death, how they want somebody to help them divide up their estate. That has nothing to do with healthcare decision making. They do not make financial decisions for you, and they are not responsible for paying your medical bills. So now some of you may be thinking, who would be the best decision maker for me? And some questions to ask yourself. Number one, you want somebody you trust, but are they willing? Have I asked them to do this? It's important that we do so, and we need to know they're willing to do it. And are they willing to have conversation with me about that possible catastrophic situation so that they understand my preferences, values, and goals. Sometimes people are not willing to have that conversation, and they want to say, oh, Mom, I know what you want. It's okay. We got this. You're fine. But it's the role of the decision maker to make the same decisions for you that you'd make for yourself if you could. So the only way to know is to have conversation and to clarify things. So they need to be willing to have conversation. And they need to be willing to follow your preferences, even if they wished you made a different choice. So that's really important. So that's another reason why the conversation is important. You need to know what you want so they can be sure that they can honor your wishes. And this last one's super important. Can this person ask questions and make decisions in difficult or emotional situations? Can they think and communicate clearly in a crisis? And can they stand up for you? Can they be an advocate for you with the healthcare team and family members and other loved ones who might disagree with decisions? That is really, really important. And we want someone who can be a strong advocate for us and say, wait a minute, I've talked to Dad. He told me what he wanted. And we're going to make sure that we're making decisions that are consistent with what he wants. So how do we start a conversation about advanced care planning? So easy enough with say how I started this conversation with you. Have you ever heard of it? What do you know about it? And hear what people have to say, and that'll give you an idea of what they understand. And then the simple explanation is that it is planning and thinking ahead and talking about a situation where I may be unable to make healthcare decisions for myself, and reminding everyone that any one of us could have that sudden accident or illness that leaves us unable to speak for ourselves. Everyone understands this. It's not a secret. And then are you willing to have some conversation with me about advanced care planning? So just simple ways to start the conversation, which I know can be hard to start. And then once we start that conversation, we've selected somebody we think would be a good healthcare decision maker for us. And now we're going to have some conversation, make sure that they understand what our preferences would be and that they can honor our preferences. What do they need to know so that they're able to help guide clinical decision making? And we do this through additional conversation and through creating documents. And to actually guide clinical decision making effectively, we want to explore our experiences with people who've been very ill and then define what quality of life means to us. This is very individual. And what our goals for care would be in given situations. So experiences. So we learn what kind of care that we want and don't want through our experiences. So people that I talk to are generally, somewhere on the continuum of, it was, we held hands around grandmother's bed and we sang her into whatever awaits us on the other side. And it was sad, but it was beautiful and it was peaceful. And that when my time comes, that's what I want. I want to have a similar experience. All the way to, I felt like my loved one was suffering. The family was falling apart and arguing. And I do not want it to be like that when it's my time. So those experiences really help us figure out what we want for ourselves. So asking that person that you think might be a good decision maker for you, and thinking for yourself, what experiences have you had with people who've been seriously ill in a serious accident? How have they informed your decisions? Think to yourself, what experiences have I had? What did I learn from those experiences? Have you ever had to make decisions for somebody close to you who could no longer speak for themselves? What did you learn from that? And what did they teach you about the kind of care you want or don't want if you were ever in the same situation? And this last one is really, really important. Clarify the meaning of words and phrases. People tend to say the same things. They tell me, don't leave me hooked up to machines. I don't want to be a vegetable. I don't want to be a burden. I want to be independent, or I want everything. Those are all the kinds of things. Oh, another one, just pull the plug. I've heard all those things. But what those things mean is is very different depending on the individual. So we have to ask people, what does that mean to you? What does being a vegetable look like to you? And what does what do you mean being a burden? What does that mean? We need to explore what that means and ask more questions so that we can understand what the person's goals, values, and preferences. And when I'm talking about understanding somebody else's, I'm also talking about our own understanding. So if you find yourself thinking as you're listening to this, just don't leave me and be a vegetable. Well, try thinking, what does that mean? What level? I think we talk about this on the next slide, but here we go. So how do we talk about that? That's really a quality of life question, and these are some ways that we help people talk about that. What gives your life meaning? What's important to you? What abilities are so important to you you can't imagine living without them? What level of physical and mental function do you need in order to have a good quality of life? Again, people are very different when they answer this. So for example, something very common that people tell me is that I need to be able to take care of my own myself. We call that in our business, in healthcare business, activities of daily living, or ADLs, meaning I get myself up out of bed in the morning, I get myself into the bathroom and get washed up and dressed, and I'm feeding myself, and I can get outside. Those are the kind, I can take a walk. Those are the kinds of things that people tell me. But then I need to ask more questions, and I need to say, okay, well, if you ever found, I can see that's important to you, if you ever found yourself in a place where you needed help with those things, would that be okay? This is important because that's where the road goes in different directions. Some people tell me, no, it would not be okay. I need to be able to take care of those things myself, all of them. Other people say, well, sure, I would take some help with those things. That's the way life is. And other people say, well, yeah, as long as I have awareness of myself and I can talk to my family, I would let somebody take complete care of me. So that's how that question kind of goes, and you can see why it's important that we think about these in the context of ourselves and ask other people and make sure that our decision makers have this understanding. And then, so if we're being presented with a treatment plan, here's the treatment plan. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have some surgery, and it's going to be followed by some chemotherapy and some radiation and whatever that treatment plan might be. The questions so what we want our decision makers to do, or we're going to do if we're doing it for ourselves, is what's the goal of that treatment? What's our goal? What do we want to have happen when we're done with that treatment? And one way to get to that is, what fears or concerns do we have about the illness? And if our condition gets worse, what would be our most important goals? Is there something I'm trying to get to, a place, a time frame, something to think about? What's important to me, so that we can evaluate the treatment plan and say, is this consistent with my goals and what I want? So for individuals who do not have a trusted person to name as their healthcare decision maker, these conversations are really, really important. The conversations about the kind of care I want and don't want in this future situation when I can't make decisions for myself. Really important, because it's likely, if you don't have a trusted individual to name, then it's likely that someone who does not know you well, may not share your values, is going to have to make those healthcare decisions. It's either going to be some relative out there that you're not close to, or that's, sometimes we have to go to court and have a guardian appointed for someone to make decisions, and that guardian needs some direction. So if an individual does not have somebody they trust to name as a healthcare agent, describing the situations, what kind of care they want and don't want in future situations, is really important. Well, and so how do we create these documents? So we talked about that understanding and reflection and then communication is part of the advanced care planning process. And one way, obviously, one way we're communicating is with the people we're thinking about being a decision maker. We want to communicate with them, but the other is to talk to our healthcare team. And one important way to communicate with both of those people is by creating a document. So a healthcare power of attorney or a power of attorney for healthcare appoints a healthcare decision maker. Again, only in the event that an individual cannot make decisions for him or herself. And then the Advanced Directive Living Will is a document that provides care instructions. This is the kind of care, this is the kind of care I want or don't want in certain circumstances. So we'll talk about those documents a little bit more. You have to be 18, so an adult or an emancipated minor, which only happens through court proceeding, to create one of these documents. It has to be created by someone with sufficient mental capacity. We're going to talk about what that means in the next slide. But and they can be canceled or revoked or modified at any time, but only by the individual who creates them. The person you appoint as your decision maker, or a family member cannot create, revoke, or override a patient's advance directive. This can be difficult because sometimes people who are not the decision maker are very vocal about decisions that need to be made, and that's why the person you select as your decision maker needs to be such a strong advocate for you to make sure that the healthcare team understands that they are legally the decision maker and they will be making decisions for you. So let's get back to that. Another important thing I want to mention here is, so sometimes I see people, so an individual has created a document appointing a decision maker. If they've lost capacity, that decision maker is making decisions, but for whatever reason, that person is not able to make decisions anymore. And I see sometimes they try to assign that to somebody else. They can't do that. Unfortunately, if you should always, we're going to look at the document together toward the end of this, and it provides a space for a primary decision maker and a backup. And that's really important. So if you and the primary are in the car at the same time, that there is somebody that can still speak for you. But it's important, if you only have one person, it's important that you and they know that they can't assign this to somebody else. And it goes right back to that decision-making hierarchy that I explained at the beginning, how Virginia law determines who the decision maker is. All right, so let's move on to this capacity issue. So in order to create one of these documents, an individual has to have capacity, decisional capacity, and that means that person has the ability to understand the information, understand the choices, and the ability to state a decision. And capacity is task specific. So even people who've been diagnosed with some dementia may understand about the necessity of appointing a healthcare decision maker and be very clear about who they want to be their decision maker. We need to evaluate it according to the thing that's happened, the task itself. And in this case, it would be appointing a decision maker. So we need to take a look at that. But what's really important to remember here is this is another reason why it's really important to do this well in advance of the crisis. So let's say the crisis is a traumatic brain injury from an accident. I fall and I have a traumatic brain injury. And it's possible that I could be returned to a place where I have capacity after that brain injury, but it's possible I will not be. And then I will have lost the opportunity to find the person I trust who's the best suited to be my decision maker. So we're going to talk about the documents themselves, and we're going to look at the Virginia Standard Advance Directive. So it allows for the appointment of a healthcare agent, your decision maker. You can also provide living will instructions in two specific situations: imminent death or lack of awareness. And we'll look at that document itself, and I'll read that language to you. And there's also a statement about anatomical gifts. If you're and this is like they do when you get your driver's license. If you want to be an organ donor, you just check it off. So this is what the document looks like. You may, have seen something like this. So this is it's a 3-page document. And this is where your name, the individual's name, goes on the top line. And the first section is appointment and powers of the agent. So I appoint my agent, and it's important that you do the name and their relationship to you, because we need to know who that person is. We might need to track them down. So if they're, a spouse, a child, a sibling, a brother, sister, a friend, a fiance, whatever it is, we need to say what the relationship is. Provide as much of an address as possible and a phone number so that we can contact this person if it ever comes to it. And then this says if the primary agent is not reasonably available or is unable or unwilling to act, then I appoint a successor agent, a backup, to serve in that capacity. And the same thing, we need a name, the relationship, an address, and a telephone number. And then the document lists all the powers of the agent. And the lawyers made this document, so they made it very legalistic. But the fact of the matter is that you are giving your decision maker the authority to make any healthcare decisions for you that you could make for yourself. So there's no secret here. It's just they just listed out a lot of the different types of decisions a decision maker would need to make. The only one you have to be specific about is number 9 here on page 2. And some people have family situations where there might be a loved one that could come into the hospital and could insist that they be the loudest voice in the room, or would want to undermine your decision maker, or maybe they're just a drama king or a queen. And you really would prefer they would not be present if you're ever in one of these difficult situations. If you want your healthcare decision maker to be able to limit visitors, you have to specifically give them that right. So in this number 9, you would write something like, I give my agent the authority to limit visitation. That's all you need to say. If there's nobody that you're worried about in your family, you need to leave it blank. And then hospital policy applies. And if anybody misbehaves, the hospital will ask them to leave. But this is specifically for people who want to avoid having conflicts with people that they know are prone to cause those conflicts. So that's section number 1. That's the healthcare decision maker section. This is the healthcare instructions, or sometimes we call it the living will section. And as I said, in the Virginia Advanced Directive, the standard advanced directive, I like to say that it's both broad and narrow at the same time. Narrow because it describes a very specific situation, and then broad because they put all the life-sustaining treatments in together. So the situation is, in the event my attending physician determines that my death is imminent, very close, and medical treatment will not help me recover. That's the situation. And then your choices are, I don't want treatments to prolong my life. I understand, and they list them all: tube feedings, IV fluids, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, ventilators, breathing machines, kidney dialysis, or antibiotics. I understand that I will receive treatments to relieve pain and make me comfortable. One important thing to remember here is that just saying in here, in this event, my death is imminent. If I said I don't want these treatments and I don't want CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, it's not creating that order. If you've ever been in the hospital, you've probably had a conversation with a doctor, and they asked you about if your heart and breathing were to stop, which is dying. If you die, do you want us to try to bring you back? And we do. You've seen it all on television. In real life, it looks nothing like that, but it's the pressing on the chest and the shocks and medication and all that kind of stuff. So just because you say in this future situation, I don't want CPR, doesn't mean you automatically are going to get an order that says this patient doesn't want CPR. It's only in that specific situation. These are guidelines for your decision maker and your doctors to help make sure the care you receive is the kind of care you want in these certain circumstances. So back to the event itself, my attending physician determines that my death is imminent and medical treatment will not help me recover. Here's where the conversation is important, because what does imminent mean? It means very close, but what does very close mean to you? So for some people, it might be 5 minutes. For other people, it might be 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. We don't know unless we talk about that and think about it. Let's say you're in that car accident I'm so fond of talking about, and you've been hurt badly and you're in the emergency department and they've been working on you for a couple hours. Things are not looking good. That would be an imminent, maybe they're saying, I don't think we're going to be able to continue this more than even less than an hour. I don't think we have. That's very imminent. And this would be your decision maker's opportunity to say, well, then let's stop now. I want to go hold my loved one's hand now, if I can. But think of another scenario. What if you have one of the chronic and progressive illnesses I've talked about? And that could be chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, or HIV, or heart failure, or cancer. And imminent in that situation could mean you've been getting treatment for many years, and hopefully you've been doing well for many years. But at some point, maybe those treatments aren't working, and we don't have anything new to offer you. Maybe that's close enough. Maybe 6 months is imminent in that situation, because you really want to start focusing on how do I spend this last time of my life? How do I want to spend that? Maybe you decide, yes, I am willing to take a chance on this last ditch therapy and continue to have the chemotherapy and the radiation. That's what I want. Then that's what we need to know. That's what your decision maker needs to know if you can't make that decision for yourself. But other people might say, well, maybe I'm eligible for hospice now, and I can get that wonderful benefit where people can come into my home and help my family take care of me. And the chances that I might be with my family and they might be standing next to me and holding my hand when I go is much, much higher than if I'm in the hospital on these machines. So that's the kind of conversation that everyone needs to have. So that's the first situation. My death is imminent. And my doctors do not think I'm going to recover. And this is important too. Most people will absolutely want all of these treatments if they're for a relatively short period of time and are going to get us back to that level of physical and mental function that we need to have in order to have a good quality of life. People want that. This is saying we're not there. This isn't, we're not talking about using this stuff to get you over a hump and we're going to return you to your former level of function. This is we don't have anything left right now. This treatment is not going to change the outcome here. Okay. And then you can write in your own instructions. I'm always very cautious about that because those, in my experience, when I read those, they can be super confusing. So better to have a conversation with someone and explain what you mean and let us document that in your medical record under the conversation than try to make it clear in this document. Okay, so the second scenario, the first scenario is imminent death, and very unlikely that you will recover. The second situation is my death isn't imminent, but I'm in this situation now where I am unaware of myself and my surroundings or unable to interact with others, and it is reasonably certain I will never recover this awareness or ability even with medical treatments. So again, back to that car accident, you've had that traumatic brain injury and you are unaware of yourself. And your doctors say, and some time has passed, and the doctors are saying, we do not expect this to change even with medical treatment. So again, you can say that in that situation, I'll just say for a lot of people, the ability to have awareness of their loved ones and to be able to interact with them is really one of their bottom lines. When I can no longer do that, then I'm ready to allow for a natural and peaceful death. If this isn't a way it's going to be for the rest of my life, I'm ready to allow for that natural and peaceful death. So, and again, you can say in that situation that I don't want treatments to prolong my life, or I do want all those treatments. I'm the type of person who, I don't care. I'll put up with anything for the smallest chance of getting better. Or this one offers this third option. I want to try for a period of time to see if I improve. But if I don't improve, then I'm ready to change my treatment. So it's just focusing on pain relief and symptom control, and I'm ready to allow for a natural death. And you can actually suggest a time frame, or you can say, I just leave it up to my agent, my decision maker. So, for example, one thing you can think about here is that if you ever had to have a breathing tube in, after about 10 days to 2 weeks, the breathing tube can't stay down your throat, and at that point we have to do the hole in your neck called a tracheostomy, and then we have to put a tube in your stomach to feed you, called a peg tube. So for a lot of people, that's a natural stopping point. If you try for 2 weeks to get me off this ventilator, and you're saying no, we're talking about long-term ventilation. Again, you're not able to make decisions for yourself, so you don't have a whole lot of awareness at that point. It's important for you to let your decision maker know yes, I'd be willing to put up with long-term ventilation and the chance that I might get better, or no, that's my bottom line. I'm not willing to do that. All right. And so, and then this last section, as I said, is about anatomical gifts. And then very important, the document needs to be dated. It needs to be signed by the declarant. That's the person who's filling out the document, and has to be 2 witnesses, 2 adults with capacity have to watch the person sign the document and sign as witnesses. That's what's necessary to create a valid advance directive in Virginia. Different states are different, so we're just talking about Virginia today. And then it'd be super important that this document comes to us in the health system so we can get it in the medical record. So this last slide is focusing on resources. So some of you may want to learn more about this, and there are various ways you can learn. Prepare for Your Care. There's actually a way to link to the Prepare for Your Care tool in MyChart in Epic. And it has a lot of explanation and conversation in there to help you figure out what you want for yourself and help you communicate with others. Honoring Choices Virginia is an organization that's committed to helping people in the community have these conversations and create these documents. National Healthcare Decisions Day was created by a lawyer right here, Nathan Kotkamp, right here in Richmond, Virginia, to encourage people to have these conversations. And if you went on the computer and looked them up, there would be resources. And then the Conversation Project is another one, created by Ellen Goodman, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who started this conversation project after her mother died, and she realized how much conversation she had not had and wanted to make sure that other people did have this conversation. Another great resource is LINC, Legal Information Network for Cancer, and our oncology patients at VCU have the ability to work with LINC on advanced directives, but also on other legal documents like last wills and testament and financial powers of attorney, not just healthcare powers of attorney. So that's a good resource. And then I have some individuals' names over here. These are some nurses. Hope is here at VCU, and Erin down at CMH, who have special training to help patients figure out what it is they need and make sure that they can help them, or they can get them to someone who can help them. And then here is a list of our social workers at various locations, like the Adult Outpatient Pavilion, AOP. We have a resource for Tappahannock, Stony Point, Hanover. So these are people who are willing, if you want to have some conversation about this, if you want assistance creating a document or making sure that your document gets into the medical record, you can call these individuals and get in touch with them, or I think Hope provided her email address as well. So you can contact these individuals, and then and they will be in a position to help figure out how we can best help you. So that is that's the end of my formal presentation, and I am willing to take any questions if there's anybody on here that would like to ask any. All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions. And I and again want to thank Susan and Melissa for inviting me to come and have this conversation today, and thank all the people who will be listening to it for the time that you're taking to explore this important topic. And if we can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see if we can help you out with having conversation about this and creating a document. Thank you very much.